Yeah, I got what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah, but you can hear it like straight away. And we just didn't want to be, copy of a copy of a copy. Because we want, and we play like 90% of our shows is outside Balkan area. So we didn't want to go, for example, to Glastonbury Festival in UK and be the, 43rd band that played punk. And then imagine Bosnians who are trying to sing in Cockney accent and, to be like Sex Pistols. It would sound awfully fake. So that's why we put, always there is this, how to say, there is this a smell of, one ingredient that you can connect, that we are coming from Balkan area, and, this is why we speak English like this, and this is our music background. We will use, electronic music, we will use ska music, we will do reggae, we will use hip hop. We're going to use all of that. But we want you to hear, like, in after 1 minute, to understand our background. And then you can understand our stories much better.
And it's also story about the stereotypes, how Western people perceive Balkan and how they perceive Balkan music. They expect to hear, very traditional brass bands, or they have their vision how Balkan music should sound like. And it goes on the back of all these world music, let's say. You had, in one moment, you had very popular Cuban music, you had very popular Indian music, and then it goes like 4 years later, they find some other piece of Africa's to be popular, and then Balkan is popular, and then it kind of wears off, and then they search for a next interesting area to be featured on every world music festival. And we came as a kind of second wave of this Balkan music. First, of course, came the very traditional band, and then this is something that is not expected. They sometimes book us on a festival as a Balkan band, especially in the beginning of the band, and then they are surprised. There is punk, there is ska, there is reggae, there is hardcore, there is some Balkan. They didn't expect that. They wanted to hear this very stereotypical vision, their vision of Balkan. They like, and it's for us. It was very exciting to kind of surprise them with all of this. It's a culture shock in a way. You book some indigenous Balkan people to play some very traditional music, and then you come with electric guitars and keyboards, and then you make a lot of noise, and then they scratch their heads and they don't know what happened.
They basically expected, gypsy brass band.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily know a lot about Balkan music. When I listen to your music and I hear the horn lines you guys write, like, to me, that's where I go, okay, I get that this is from this area, that the way the horn lines are written. Is that how you, or are there other ways to define sort of the musical elements that to you is distinctly Balkan in your songs?
It's also funny because we are coming from, I don't know, I'm personally coming from alternative rock, hip hop background. Like, I don't know, Public Enemy was my first band. Fate No More was one of the first band that I discovered. That's my direct musical background. Later, I discovered Balkan music. I couldn't take guitar and play any Balkan song. Because it's different scale, different place. So I had to learn that, and that was the fun part. When you basically learning your own music
heritage.
Yeah, after you learned like Western music, so you are rediscovering your own identity in the moment, and you are relearning that. I mean, you have some of that in back of your head because my grandmother was making, I don't know, some meal listening to traditional Bosnian music, whatever. And, it's somewhere there, but I don't know how to play it. And then we have to find people who play in traditional bands to learn from them how to do that, because the scale is completely different. Everything is different. And the biggest challenge and biggest fun was how to merge all of those kinds of music together with Balkan music, but not to be just layered like this, just simply put layers on top. We wanted to sound naturally connected. So I think we find some ways how to do it.
Now, to me, it feels like, there's a lot of ska and reggae in your music, and it feels like ska and reggae and these sort of Balkan scales and Balkan horn lines mesh together so well. Like, it really works well to have those ska reggae grooves and the chords of Balkan music and the horn lines and stuff. Is that something? Do you feel like that's partly why there's so much ska and reggae in your music?
In that process, we basically discovered that
which works with what?
Bosnian or Balkan parts of Balkan traditional music have the same rhythm, same groove as a ska.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar, different harmonics, but the groove is the same. So that was the main place where we start, where to connect those things together. And when I was 4, my father was a big reggae fan, and he was doing the the cassette tapes, right? So each weekend we would spend sitting, and he was making these compilations of reggae music on the tapes. And when I was 4, my first cassette was A side was Best of Bob Marley, and B side was Best of Eddie Grant, I guess. That was my first cassette tape. So reggae was kind of deep into it. I just rediscovered it in one point, and it was clear that I know this from my past, and it just came together. I don't know. This process, it was so much fun, because you remember, what I was listening with my father, and then I rediscovered what my grandmother was listening, and then you understand it's the same groove, and you start jamming with all these memories, from back of your mind, and you get something interesting, and you say, okay, this is the direction where we should go. Because imagine if we are Bosnian ska reggae band, again, we're trying to speak in fake Jamaican. It would be very silly, right?
Well, it's it's perfect because a lot of bands from Latin America play ska, but you can hear their grooves and their influences in it, and it meshes really well. It sounds amazing. You guys do the same thing. You're taking ska and reggae and you're mixing your own cultural music to it, and it mixes and sounds really well. Was there any ska? You talked about Bob Marley and Eddie Grant. Was there any ska that was influential to you, coming up or even more recently?
Oh no, all the classics.
Yeah, you're more old ska.
It is as Brano said. It is we are generation that matured musically during this early 90s, and the biggest influences were what was there, from grunge to alternative rock, from metal to all these 90s music was the biggest influence on us. And then we, when you start listening to punk from the 90s, and then you go back, and then you somehow you discover 80s or 70s, even Madness or Specials, or you just go back. And because of course this was the music that happened before we were born or we were kids, so we had to rediscover it. And then obviously you like it because you connect the dots and you see what influenced what that came later, and what you liked, of course.
But it's interesting because in a neighborhood where I grew up, it was working class neighborhood. So the I don't know how to explain, but the system,
there was a class system.
kind of class system, and you had to respect the older guys